Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. In news, well, some news just dropped while I was asleep apparently. CCP has announced the changes that they are doing to the moon mining ore compositions, and yeah, it is a massive nerf to normal minerals. Everything is gone except for some pyrite and some mexalon. That is going to be very interesting. I think it completely guts what is possible in nullsec. It is going to make highsec a lot more valuable, and I think it is going to incentivize trade. Of course, if you need minerals, you're gonna have to import some of them, I think, from highsec probably into nullsec. So should be very interesting. I personally find it very funny. I sold a lot of BPCs for the refineries at like 30 million ISK, things like that, like crazy prices. So demand was super high at some point. That has dropped off in the last week, but this announcement should really gut that market as well. It is basically, I think, going to be super expensive at this point to keep a refinery up and running, which I'm planning to do, but we will take a look at that later. If you haven't seen it yet, the new EVE Pulse video has a little bit of a teaser, a redesign for the Avatar Titan. Really cool, in my opinion, and they also announced that there should be a trailer coming next week. So I think we are starting to get into announcement season for what CCP is planning for the next quadrant in EVE Online. I can't wait for all of that information. Next up, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store. If I'm not mistaken, in the EVE Pulse there was a sale announced, and here we get some skins on sales. Snowline, okay, one here as well. It's probably that package. So, well, actually these cruisers don't fit, but some of these frigates, that does make sense if you can then combine that, for instance, with a Macarial. Ooh, Macarial skin. The Angel Hex skin on sale. That's actually a decent discount here. It's an amazing looking skin. One of the first animated skins, if I'm not mistaken, with the lights and things like that. Very cool. Omega and Extractor bundle is also on sale, so should put a little bit of pressure on the price of plex. And there we go. Escapologist bundle. Let's see what's in here. So we get Armageddon, Dominix, then we get Enyo, Hawk, Jaguar, Raven, Retribution and Typhoon. So some of those basic, I would say, battleships, but Dominix, very versatile, really good. Armageddon, I really love that ship as well. And then the Typhoon, yeah, it makes sense. Really versatile battleships, and then some skins for the frigates that you can now use in the frigate escape bay. Alright, well, we got some sales going on in the New Eden store. That is pretty cool, but of course we gotta move on to the market. That's why everyone is here, and we're gonna start with our plex and stuff coming in at 310. Like that. Alright, let's get started with the price of a plex, and we can see here that we reached a 1-year low point, landing on 3.1 million for the average price, and then we started moving sideways. So this is a little bit of a surprise to me, despite that sale for Omega plus Extractor. We haven't seen an immediate effect on this one. I think it is because I saw the EVE Pulse yesterday, I believe, and it might still need a little bit of time to actually push through. So if this looks like the right time to invest, it could be so, but we might see a further push down because of what's happening in that sale, of course. Right now in JITA, a little bit above 3.3 million, which is actually up a little bit from last week, and just above 3 million for the buyers. And then if you go into the player-owned trade hubs, 3.2 million for the sellers, and the buyers stay in the same region around below 3.1 million. So this does mean that putting up a buy order below 3.1, considering where the sellers are at, is going to give you a good chance of grabbing that plex, because the average price is between these two. So that is interesting. That does make it perhaps interesting to look into investing in these already. Below 3.1 million, very clear cutoff point. If we look at this chart, that looks like a pretty good place to get started on that plex price. Next up, we have the multiple pilot training certificates, and those are going down in price as well, being under pressure. I'm not sure if that's because of a sale, because this is a surprise move, or perhaps it's just a little bit bit more pressure from the price of plex as well, which is slowly going down, and the 1.5 billion is probably more in line with the current price of plexes. It's still 1.6 billion for the first seller in JITA, most at 1.7. Buyers though, look at that, 1.25 billion. That is a significant gap that's opened up here. And in the trade hubs, well, 1.6 billion, well above that as well. And then we go up to 1.5 billion for the buyers, and this is of course where the action probably is. People are trying to grab these multiple pilot train certificates for around 1.5 billion. Bit of competition on the buy side apparently. That's a bit of a surprise, although it may be understandable of course. If you want that investment and you want it to be large, then something like the training certificate could be the place to go. Next up we get the skill extractor market. We'll start with the chart that does pretty much the same thing as the plex market. We go to a 1-year low point and then we start to move sideways a little bit, 360 to 370 million, so we definitely broke that range. We're still at almost 380 million for the sellers, but the buyers are dropping off, 355 million in JITA. And they don't budge in the player-owned trade hubs. Sellers go from 380 all the way down to 364, so that is what's putting that pressure on the price. Yeah, one year low point yet again. That should be bad news for the large skill injectors. Well, it's limited damage, but I would say the bad news is that we are breaking the 800 million mark on the downside. So we could be in for a bit of a retraction here as well. 820 million still for the sellers, 830 for most actually in JITA. And then look at that again, 755 million for the buyers. So demand is dropping off here and is driving the price down. What do the sellers do in the player-owned trade hubs? They're staying above 800 million, but only by a hair. So this will not last very long. I think if these buyers aren't up in the trade hubs, they're up to 773. So it's gonna be very difficult, I think, for these sellers to maintain that sell price of more than 800 million ISK. And is that a 1-year low point? Well, 780 is. So these buyers are grabbing or trying to grab these large skill injectors below the entire chart here as well. Next up, we've got the small skill injectors. So these are down a bit and then flat at the tail end, because I want to make a note of that, because these have been moving very independently. And here again, while the large skill injector was down and moved sideways, the small skill injector actually had a bit of a contraction in price away from the 170 million mark, or actually breaking the 170 million mark, I should say. And at this point, we should start with JITA to keep the pattern rolling. 174 million for JITA. Bars coming in at 154, a bit less of a margin than with the large skill injectors. And then if we go in the trade hubs, the sellers go down to 162, so a bit of pressure there as well. And then the buyers, they don't move. So this is again very, very different dynamic between these two, where the buyers are the same everywhere, and we actually see a bit of pressure on the price between JITA and the player-owned trade hubs. For the large skill injectors, the big difference here is that we have basically a contraction on both sides towards the middle for this item. So a little bit of a weird market, but that's what we're dealing with at the moment. Between these large and these small skill injectors, they're doing their own things. The daily alpha injectors are also under pressure. Are they able to stay above 40 million, at least for the sellers? In JITA they are. Buyers at 38 million, a bit more reasonable in a margin. And then the sellers stick to that same price range around JITA, and for the buyers doesn't move that much either. So here we're basically, we try to break out. We went above 40 million ISK, but now on the average, we're back just on that range. And then finally, we'll take a quick look at the hypercore. That is actually at the lower end of its trade range at the moment, going for around 340,000 ISK. It's actually to 333 for the first seller and 320,000 for the buyers. But yeah, this is a little bit too young of a market, in my opinion, to really notice trends. If you could get anything out of this, is that a little bit of pressure probably indicates a little bit less usage either someone tried to get some ISK through hypercores or a bit less usage, a bit less demand from the Hypernet relay, which I haven't looked into in a very long time, to be honest. So for me, this is a feature if you want to use it, purely optional, and it really doesn't bother me that it's in the game. I don't even notice it. Yeah, local in Jita is not something I keep a close eye on. Let's move on to the minerals that ought to be more interesting, coming in at 10 minutes. Well, more interesting, honestly, plex and stuff is definitely in an interesting spot. I just want to say that again. 1 year low point, and for the skill extractors as well. So it's not that this is not potentially very interesting for investors. But moving on to titanium, we've got this sharp increase all of a sudden. It hasn't actually materialized how high this is going to jump, because CCP announced changes to the moon compositions that are going to, I think, come into effect very soon. Your current extractions will still have that composition, but the rest of them, yeah, will be basically without any of these basic minerals. It's going to be very interesting. The value of these will go down substantially. But we will see how it works out. I'm definitely keeping mine up and running at this point. And let's take a look at those sellers. We were up to 1178. Now some people are coming in with 11 ISK and 1040, so there's some serious undercutting. Maybe they don't know about the news just yet, and they're basically trying to sell at what they consider to be an amazing price. Another possibility is, of course, that we've got a little bit of dumping happening with people that were holding on to some of that titanium. They're saying this is the perfect opportunity to cash out. I want to be certain of my sale. 11 ISK, just undercut by one, and see what happens. Try to get that moving as quickly as possible. But buyers are up to 870 in the in Jita, and it's pretty much the same in the player-owned trade hubs. And so 870, oh yeah, for the buyers we're keeping the filter up because the green is very noticeable, and then for the sellers we'll take a look at that in a moment. But yeah, 870, that's up here for the buyers. They have all of a sudden jumped above the sell price of last week, and then the sellers are coming in 10, 11 ISK, and in the player-owned trade hubs, yeah, there is some selling happening as well in the perimeter trade hubs, the perimeter tranquility trade tower and the refinery for around 10.5 ISK. It's still a very noticeable jump here in titanium, and of course this is a drought phase. This could be the start. Honestly though, if you've got some reserves of titanium, I think it makes a lot of sense to sell it. Next up here we get pyrite. Here we don't see a move. I think that is because the dev blog or the article was very clear that there is still pyrite and Mixlon that will be available through the moon mining mechanic. So once again, pyrite now well below the price of titanium, which is actually a bit of a weird situation. It's still 8 ISK almost for the sellers. A little bit of dumping. Oh no, these are actually either old orders or they set them up for a different amount of days. But that's another like 10 billion units that are being dropped in pyrite. That is of course going to keep things pretty stable as well. Perhaps this was also a bit of gambling on pyrite increasing in price as well, with titanium doing so. So maybe this was a little bit of trying to trick the market into buying all of that pyrite. And then we get Mixlon that also has that same hesitation around the 70 ISK range, 72 for the sellers and 62 for the buyers. Basically, I think these haven't moved because they have announced that these are remaining as part of the moon mineral mix. So that should mean that Isogen could be the big winner here. Let's see if that is materializing. Definitely not on the chart yet. It's staying above 20 ISK. It's still 21 for the sellers and 19 ISK for the buyers. So this one was hit so badly with all of the changes to mining, to ore compositions and things like that. This stuff used to be worth like twice what Mixlon is, and it is still hovering at the 20 ISK range. Okay, well, that is the situation. Titanium, the big winner, of course. When I was making the ticker, it was 1178 as the first sell order. Perhaps this will get snagged up rather quickly. We will see how that works out. But also, apparently, where players are speculating most problems will arise is how the hell are we going to get some titanium, and that's actually understandable. I actually made a video specifically on titanium because it is a rather unique mineral in the sense that it is very bulky. It is difficult to transport titanium. This could be very good news for compressed feldspar ores, dense regular feldspar. Things like that will probably go up in value substantially as well, because if you want to import some titanium, it's not with this good that you would do it, but with the compressed ores, of course, you get a much better yield per tonnage for those. After Isogen, we take a quick look at Noxium, that is still basically stabilizing from that massive doubling of the price on the announcement of the resource changes and the nerfs to the anomalies. So we're landing on 350, 360 ISK for the sellers, 324 for the buyers. That is basically decently stable. And then we have our former nullsic minerals. Here is the Zydrine chart that is continuing to slowly climb away from that 600 mark. Pretty impressive actually. 615 for the sellers and 574 for the buyers. And then Megasite, for me this feels really weird. A bit of a retraction in the price again. We tried to get above 450. It doesn't last for very long. 422 for the first seller, 403 for the buyers. So Megasite is now substantially cheaper than Zydrine, which is historically speaking also a reverse situation. Zydrine always used to be the more expensive mineral. And then finally we've got Morphite that is staying really strong around 15,000 ISK, 15,000 for the sellers and 14,500 for the buyers. Very expensive at the moment, hovering at that 1 year high point. Really impressive, also needed in those new implants. So I actually got a blueprint from my exploration for those new Nirvana implants, I think they're called, and yeah, they're part of the mix. So very strong demand here still, and we are doing nicely. Over the 1 year chart, double the price for Morphite, and you can pretty easily sell at this point. So very, very impressive performance here. And then of course the outlier here is that crazy titanium spike, which next week should be very visible. We'll see. This really is going to make it hard for nullsec to meet its own needs in some of these minerals. So for highsec, that does mean quite a bit of value potentially there. Next up, the PI market coming in at 1650. And let's go over these. Basically a story that is now also that I spotted in the plex stuff, which was, generally speaking, we have too low demand for all of the PI materials. One exception, the advanced PI materials were actually doing really well. So advanced PI went up pretty much across the board in the last couple of weeks. Quite some spike, quite some volatility there, staying above average most of the time. Broadcast nodes are coming back from that high, so we went up to almost 2.3 million. We're down to less than 2.1 million for the sellers, but just below 2 million for the buyers. So this is right back on the average or just above average. Still a decently strong performance. And then perhaps we can take a look at supply demand. It's not entirely balanced, but it still feels like it is quite decent. After that, we've got our construction blocks, and let's see if there's any signs that this is going to change. No, so far here we're staying below 10,000 ISK on the 5-day moving average. That is of course well below average for construction blocks, and despite this nice comeback we had in January and February, we're basically continuing this fall slump with a real lack of demand. 10,400 for the sellers, 9,300 for the buyers. You can see that I can scroll a lot less on the sellers, on the buyers, excuse me, than on the sellers. So another part of the explanation could of course be that we do have some new players coming into the game, especially probably a decently large Chinese player base. And if you want to get established in the game, if you want something that is rather stable yields and not too much effort, then of course it would be PI. I love it for that personally, and that could be also part of the reason why we're basically being flooded with PI at the moment. More supply from new players, but not that much demand because they're not in the place yet, I think, where they try to buy a lot of that stuff. Consumer electronics next, and this is really terrible foreshadowing. Look at that. Up until this summer, the average of 12,500 was easily defended. Here we had the Nasdaq blackout, and then the false slump started up to January, never recovered, 11k as the average price, and look at that massive drop off at the tail end. 7,500 disk is coming into view, 9,500 for the first seller, 7,800 for the buyer. Now this is really sharp, this is really unexpected. And this is coming from a bottom range. To be honest, if you can grab consumer electronics below 8,000 disk, we're already talking then a 50% markup from the average to get to the average price. That is very significant. That seems like it is potentially a massive opportunity to try and grab some really cheap consumer electronics here. So someone must have been dumping to these buy orders to create these average prices. If that's still happening, you are grabbing very, very cheap consumer electronics. Next up, we've got the coolants market, also a sharp drop off going to 10,000 disk here, 10,200 for the sellers, 9,800 for the buyers. This is a very big difference with consumer electronics, despite the fact that demand is still not strong enough for the market. We don't have this massive difference between sellers and buyers that just keeps growing despite the fact that the price is so low. So the coolants obviously also trading below average, but I think at this point able to contain the damages. Hopefully it'll remain that way. I think why? The main reason is that this is tied to fuels, so it does have that stronger demand base, consumption base, I think, to look into. Next up, we've got the cryoprotectant solutions. These are still staying around 200,000 ISK here, 212,000 for the sellers and 142,000 for the buyers. Yeah, you need those in all of these implants, so as a result, demand remains strong. Enriched uranium next, also a drop-off. Was actually able to stay in that 13,500 range. Did really well to defend that, but it is not to last. 13,200 for the sellers, 10,800 for the buyers. And again, these are the sellers, quite a decent amount of browsing. These are the buyers, including the player-owned trade hub. So here we have yet another rather sharp drop-off. Next up here, the integrity response drones. Here is the spike that I was talking about, up to 3 million ISK. That is of course a very nice markup. We are recovering from that and stabilizing. We're still talking 2.5 million for the sellers. So that's actually decently expensive. 2.3 million for the buyers. That shows decent demand despite the low number of buy orders. And as a result here, we're staying slightly above average, I would say. The mechanical parts next. These slumped like last week, or in the course of last week, down to less than 10,000 disk. We get a little bit of a dead cat bounce, you could say. 10,800 for the sellers, but 9,200 for the buyers. These guys are just not budging, so you're still grabbing these mechanical parts very, very cheaply. Organic motor applicators, well, that's the first one that is showing that perhaps this was speculation, which is my theory. People are speculating on announcement for new structures and things like that, and maybe this one is the first casualty. So we went up to 1.1 million, and look at that massive drop off, not even on that big of a volume change, so I don't see this as being massive dumping because of the opportunity to sell at a better price. And maybe the announcement of at EvePulse didn't give any hints towards structures, and as a result someone is saying that we don't want to keep speculating on this. So it's less than 1 million for the sellers and 900,000 disk for the buyers, 900,000 disk below the entire chart. That all of a sudden looks rather juicy. If you still want to take that gamble that something will come out in maybe next quadrant or one of the next quadrants for structures, then you know, this could be very interesting. After that, we get robotics continuing the agonizing decline, now breaking the 85,000 mark, 81,000 for the sellers, 73,000 for the buyers. Again, showing demand just isn't there. The number of buyers are picking up. I think there's a bit more competition to try and grab these robotics because it is super cheap. 73,000, that's way below the entire chart. Our self-harmonizing power cores, here is the volatility that I was talking about, right? Some spikes, 2.25, 2.3 million, maybe even a little bit more, 2.4 million almost here on a couple of days. We are again recovering from that, 2.1 million for the sellers, 1.85 million for the buyers. So this is now really in danger of slumping if any more supply comes in as well. Superconductors are staying strong, all right? One of these exceptions, a little bit of of a weird one, which is very lucky for me because I do produce these superconductors, still selling for 16,000 disk, buyers coming in at 13,500. So there is an exception. Also, if you look at supply demand difference, you can browse. This is why the price is so high, of course. We actually have what I would call above average demand for the superconductors, and then the supply just isn't there. So I think I can put up my next seller. I've been selling everything that I've been building up during this period from September to February because the prices were really that bad. And now I've been selling well above average. I was happy to be hoarding at that point. Test Cultures continues its breakout. This is a price we haven't seen in a very long time for Test Cultures. 17,000 discs. 14,600 for the buyers. Very, very nice and impressive performance. Look at that on a 1-year chart from, let's take the really low point, the very first data point here, 6,000 disk up to 17,000 disk. That is more than double the price. If you bought during this low period and you still have some left, this is the perfect time to be selling your Test Cultures. And finally, the wetware mainframes also showing that volatility, the above average prices showing up all of a sudden in the last couple of months. We are once again recovering from that. 2.3 million for the sellers, 2.1 million almost for the buyers. So PI is in a bit of a bind in the sense that I'm seeing almost for all of these materials a lack of demand. There are just some exceptions like our superconductors, but other than that, yeah, definitely a difficult period right now for PI. Advanced Moon Materials next, coming in at 25.35. Here, I'm actually gonna drink a little bit first. Sorry about that. There we go. Here we could perhaps see a little bit of movement because of the dev blog as well, because it was announced, so maybe they're going to gamble on that, that CCP wants to change some of the BPC or the blueprint needs in order to make, was it like P4 or tier 4 moons or something like that. I'm not really sure what the classifications are there for these moon materials. So we could see some interesting moves here. Let's start with crystalline carbonites. Well, that is not what I expected. Down to a low point close to 140 for the sellers, 136 for the buyers. Well, if you look at this volatility before that and the opportunity to buy below 140 now, this looks like potentially a nice buy opportunity. So we didn't manage to climb back for like basically a third time up to 170. This time we are slumping below average. Ferrite carbide basically also going down a little bit, staying away from the real bottoms, but trading a bit below average. Sellers coming in at less than 140, buyers at 132. Pretty narrow margin here, so there is some decent demand, but we're not noticing anything too special. After that, we've got the titanium carbide that is continuing to go down, this time landing above 150, 1-year low point, 168 for the sellers, 161 for the buyers. Let's try to get 160 into view. Okay, so we're already slowly recovering from that. This slump will probably have been bought by these volumes, but we're very low in titanium carbide. Tungsten carbide continuing on the 175 range, still not doing very well, but not dropping off. 172 for the sellers, 170 for the buyers here. So in tungsten carbide, definitely not seeing any speculation on increased demand or needs or something like that. Let's take a look at the metamaterials. Photonic metamaterials moving up ever so slightly, but that must be nuanced. It comes from a 1-year high point. Even I made a small investment in photonic metamaterials. At this point, it was like slow, agonizingly staying below 15,000 disk. That was not to last too long, unless it could also have slumped down all of a sudden. But yeah, 16,000 for the sellers, 15,000 for the buyers. Basically, we went up by 1,000 disk here. Plasmonic metamaterials also a slow move up here, away from the, or back to the average of 22,500. On a lack of supply, it seems. Player on trade hubs, nothing. Yep, 22,500, less than that for a couple of sellers. 21,000 for the buyers. This could dry up, so that we could see some volatility here. After that, we've got our non-linear metamaterials also moving up a little bit. Okay, back to 25k. Interesting. 24,000 though, gap being plugged very quickly, and then 22,000 for the buyers. And finally, terahertz metamaterials continuing the decline towards 20k. 22,300 for the sellers, 20,000 just below that for the buyers. It is definitely a low point as well, but you can see that we have gone lower before. So this is a difficult choice to make. On the one hand, we're already talking 20,000 to maybe 25,000 as the potential price. 25% increase is not that bad, but potentially there's more to it. So I would want to see the chart below 20,000 at least before I make a move on terahertz metamaterials. For the other moon materials, fermionic condensates continuing a slow decline, stabilizing at the tail end, but definitely below average here as well. 85k for the sellers, less than 80,000 for the buyers. Ferrogel also dropping off here. Let's see if we manage to get the sellers above 40. Yeah, 41,000 for the sellers, 37,000 for the buyers, still below average. Fullerides is doing okay, right? We were struggling to get to 1,000 disc before. All of a sudden we're above that and we're able to keep that price range going. Almost 1,100 for the sellers, 950 for the buyers. Look out, of course, that is going to put a bit of pressure here. Hypersynaptic fibers continuing on the low point. Are we still below 10,000 for the buyers? Yes, 10,000 for the sellers, 9,600 for the buyers. If you're looking for that advanced material investment, this still makes a lot of sense as well. I think we're also basically bottoming out, so trying to still grab what's available below 10,000 disc or what is being dumped below 10,000 disc makes a lot of sense in my book. Nano transistors next, decently strong, well actually really strong performance, staying above 5,500 with 5,800 almost for the sellers, 5,700 for the buyers. This is a very narrow margin, so we're basically able to command this current price, which for this 1 year chart feels like it is a really good price. Phenolic composites continuing to struggle at the 1900 range, 2000 for the sellers, 1900 for the buyers. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. And then we get the ceramic fibers that is also declining. Our buyers below 350, they're just above 350. If these four buyers here drop off, that's when I think I would make my move on ceramic fibers as well. So the advanced moon materials struggling across the board. I thought perhaps we'd see some more volatility, speculation on what might be happening with the demand side of things in the near future, but I guess it is not there. Next up, the Take-Two market then, 31.30. And let's see if we get some more speculative stuff to work with. The Aries is landing on 25 million for the averages, bouncing off of that very quickly, it would seem. 28,000 million, excuse me, for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers, just below that. You know, if you want to be able to take advantage of these speculative jumps up to 32.5 and 35 million, this is a good place to make a move on this. 23 million for an Aries. If we try to get 23 million to show up on the chart, that is down here on the market. Yep, that looks pretty interesting. Is the availability still high? 626 here, people are competing below that. That is going to keep the pressure high, I think, and increase the chances that you can actually grab a couple of these Aries interceptors for this actual price. So this looks pretty good if you want to make a move on the Aries. Next up here we get the Basilisk. I was hoping for more of a bounce with the with the Losec faction warfare patch. It just hasn't materialized that much. 206 million for the sellers, 185 still for the buyers, which is where I moved in. So basically I could sell for a tiny profit. We are going to wait for a better opportunity. The Cerberus also went up to 250. I was hoping for a breakout towards that 280, right? I've been able to sell closer to that price before, but it's not lost. Back down to 240 for the sellers, 215 for the buyers. I still have a good investment on my ticker. Cerberus bought for 195, a reasonable investment, I'm gonna say, but yeah, I'm gonna wait for a better opportunity yet again. After that we've got the Crow, and that's a bit of a weird chart. Let's see what we can see here. Went up to 40 million ISK, dropping back down. 25 million below that would be interesting. 33 million for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. Maybe you could try to grab a crow for that price. Big difference here, right? We get some 20s, we get some 10 pluses, but you don't have a couple hundred of them that are keeping the price in check. Considering the sell price, this buy price, is going to be very difficult to grab a crow for close to 25 million. A lot easier to make a move on the Aries, in my opinion. The Guardian next, slowly going up, 230 coming into sight, 230 million for the sellers, 190 for the buyers, and I bought my Guardian, no, I tried to buy, god damn it, that's true, or actually, 190, trying to buy, 184, I'm not succeeding in that Guardian trade, so for this one, I need to hope for another slump back down so that my buy order triggers. Right now, 230, normal price, I would say, for the Guardian. 190, a bit high in my personal taste for these buyers, although I don't blame anyone for trying to grab them at this price. The Hawk, another surprise jump in the PvE assault frigate, I'm gonna say. I think that this is mostly known for being used in the Abyss. If I'm wrong on that, please make sure to tell me in the comments. But went up to 45 million ISK. Starting point was 35 million, 41 million, so recovering from that. 680 here is gonna cause some troubles again. 39 million for the buyers. A bit too early to make another move on that, but this is, in the last couple of months, 2 impressive jumps in the Hawk. So it might have been added just at the right time as volatility starts to strike. The Heretic is finally slumping up or showing a sign of forming a bottom, you could say, just above 60 million ISK. 65 million now for the sellers, 53 million for the buyers. Still a 175 here that needs to be absorbed, but after that I think the road is clear to go back up to a much better price range, which would be nice, of course, because I bought one for 52 million, which is already below both of these prices. Then we get the Hound, which did I buy any of these? Let's take a look at the ticker here. Hounds, no, unfortunately I don't have any of those available, but you can see we landed on 25 million and then we had yet another jump. We are currently at 29 million still for the first seller, 32 million for most, 27 million for the buyers. So yet another jump here in the Hound that was definitely tradable. The Ishtar, stable above 230, not that much to say on that one. 238 for the sellers, 217, 218 for the first buyer coming in here. Really stable. I think general use platforms like these with decent volumes basically have more stability. A little bit different for the Manticore, of course, jumped up to 40 million. We're recovering from that, so 35 million still for the sellers. Really good price, 32 million. Definitely too early to jump back in, but showing that the volatility in the stealth bombers is still definitely there. If you bought some for, let's say, 26, 27 million on this low point, or 25 million on this one, you're still selling at a really good price. The Munin is landing on 230. 240 for the sellers, 222 for the buyers, so that means you should be able to grab some for 222, but I don't like the volumes here to say I'm gonna be investing here. The Nemesis is shooting up. Do I have any stealth bombers? Let's see. I've got some purifiers for 22 million. That's what I bought. Okay. So the Nemesis is also going up a little bit in price. Not as much as what we would like to see, and doesn't go as low as what we would like to see, but it is still almost 20. A bit above 29 million for the sellers, 21.5 million for the buyers. That is low. That is low. Pretty big margin opening up here. Very difficult. It's much more pronounced here when we go from 30 million to 20 million, 29 to 21. It could be good. It's a little bit more risky, I feel, because we're not seeing those jumps up to like 30 plus, 35 million. That are definite returns from that 21 million range. Oneros, a bit too stable. Volumes are up a little bit though, so I guess we are up to 203 for the sellers, 173 for the buyers. Can't blame you to try and grab at least one Oneros for that price. 173 is super low, but again, keep in mind the volumes are very low for this ship, so it's a difficult trade to actually make happen. And then we get a Purifier where I bought for 22 million, buyers are up to 22.5 and sellers are at 29 million. I could already take a little bit of profit, but again, just like with the Basilisk and the Cerberus that I'm holding, I'm gonna wait for a real spike to materialize. I check this every week anyways, so I think I can do better. The Saber next, slow move up away from 65 million. We're talking 66 million for the sellers and 56 million for the buyers. Well, back to a above average price, back to the average price range. I don't want to make a move here. And then we get the Scimitar that's under pressure again. We're talking buyers at 193. Let's see if we can get that to show. Well, not the low point just yet, but yeah, you could try a buy there. And then finally, we've got the Zarmast that is stable at 300 million. And let me drink a little bit more. So the Zarmast is basically super stable for a Triglavian ship. And well, I think at a decent price as well. Next up here, the Tech Tree ships. Let's take a look at the Confessor doing a bounce up from 35 million. So that was definitely a nice buy opportunity last week. Up to 43.6 million. You can already make quite a bit of profit on that one. 38 million for the sellers. So yeah, again, another prediction that that is coming true here. You could have bought these for less than 35 million. You're already selling them for 43.6 million. Will this last very long? Well, looks like it might. Here is the Hecate with a surprise jump up to 60 million. 58 million for the sellers, 48 million for the buyer. I'm guessing here with the mineral change that they're saying take one battleship, stuff like that. Definitely not gonna be the ticket anymore. Let's move our meta a bit towards destroyers. That tactical destroyers, that is possible. So Confessor bounces up 48 million. Was that right for the sellers? No, 44 million. So definitely above average, but not that impressive. Still a great price though. Hecate though. Working its way towards 60 million ISK. That is a super big bounce. And the Jackdaw, alright. No, so I'm not gonna say that this is a complete shift to a tactical destroyer meta, because the Jackdaw very stable at 40 million, 42 for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers. Okay, very weird on that Hecate move. And then the Zwepel last week jumped up and is staying very expensive, very impressive. Actually 62 million for the Zwepel, 44 million for the buyers. Yeah, if 2 weeks ago, like I told you, you bought, you could have probably grabbed for like 33 million. That's double the money, which does mean that I was wrong last week with saying sell now, because we actually have a double jump up to 62 million. The Zwepel all of a sudden the most expensive tactical destroyer. Here I'm not going to say, well, these are healthy markets, I can predict what's happening at this point anymore, because this is just too much volatility in too short a time to be able to say exactly what's happening or what the impact on this market will be. But very impressive, of course. If you have Hecates or if you bought those Zwepels for 35 million-ish a couple of weeks ago, you are making bank right now. And then the Confessor, which if you bought these last week, you're already having a decent amount of profit there as well. That's gonna be it for my predictions here, because this is crazy. I don't have a good explanation for the Zwepel, the least popular tactical destroyer, to shoot up to the most expensive one, the Hecate, doing this really impressive breakout up to 60 million ISK from 40, a 50% increase in price. It could be meta change, right? It could be that is still something that they're Nullsec is investing in all of a sudden because of the changes, but I can't be sure because of, well, the Jackdaw being such a great versatile platform, usually most popular one as well, and that one did not move. So I don't have a good explanation, but some tremendous sell opportunities right now in the tactical destroyers. Moving on to the cruisers, we get the Legion topping off at around 190. We're down to 180 for the sellers, 156 for the buyers. Availability, in my opinion, is still terrible, so I don't really have a good explanation for this either. sell, we're still well above average. So if you still need to, you can definitely do that. For the Loki, we're also finally showing it up from 350 million. We're down to 294, and the buyers are at 246. Still a great price to sell if you look at this chart, of course. The Proteus, yeah, that one is then not moving at all. Very flat, just above 150. 160 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers. Not something I would invest in right now. And then the Tenku was dropping off as well. Went to 250 and is now back below 200 million. 179 for the buyers. Definitely too early to buy again. Still great, of course, to be selling Legions and Lokis at these crazy prices. So quite a bit of volatility all of a sudden in the Tech 3 market. Mostly sell opportunities at this point, but another lesson learned, right? That these still do shoot up very substantially. And so some speculation here, if you don't find what you're looking for in the Tech 2 Ship market, perhaps looking for those 1-year low points for the Tech 3 market might become more interesting, because this is really surprising to see such volatility all of a sudden in these tactical destroyers. Same really high prices, complete breakout prices in the Loki and the Legion as well. So to me, this means that I am going to have to look into perhaps speculating a little bit in the Tech 3 market in general. Feels a bit more risky, of course, but it might be very rewarding. And then finally, for the extra product this week, coming in at 44.50. Oh, and I don't have a timestamp for Tech 3. Well, I have to write it down after this. I got a request, basically. Someone asked me to take a look at the supercomputers. So we're going to do that. Supercomputers. Let's see if we can find it this way. There they are. Specialized planetary materials. So this is basically a step up from everything that is lacking in demand, and a step down from the ones that are needed for the structure stuff. So as a result, we actually have a very stable chart, very narrow range here, mostly between 100,000 and maybe 120,000 or something like that. The full range 90,000 to 130,000. So this is super stable, I must say. Right now at the tail end we're down a little bit, but we are still 115,000 for the sellers and 95,000 for the buyers. Slightly above 100,000 for the average, which is easily defended for most of the time. Also suffered a little bit in November, so you can clearly see that this one also was impacted, I think, by the fall slump we saw in everything that's basically a tier down from this, that's needed to create these supercomputers. But overall, this is a surprisingly strong chart for API material here, able to stay in a very strong range right now, able to command this price for a whole year straight, except for one small slump here, late November, early December. So it is not across the board that we are suffering, of course. I think I've got a decent amount that I check already in the PI slots, but if you want me to look at some specifics, definitely put that in the comments. I do try to honor these requests. Why am I not just checking everything in the PI materials category? Well, because it would take a very long time. Materials, planetary materials. This is a list. This is a list. This is a list. This is a really big list. And then finally, in the specialized, you also have, I mean, taking a look at all of this would probably take a full hour. So how did I make this selection for PI? I basically asked for requests, and this was what came out as the most popular amongst the viewers. So for now, I feel like this is actually decently representative. But yeah, if you want me to look at something very specific, feel free to post that in the comments, and I will try to honor that in as the extra product for another Eve Talk. And that's going to be it for this one, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Oh, and of course, at the end, we always take a look at the plex chart. And as always, I'll see you next time.